Hello and welcome to the Larry Arnn Show. I am Larry Arnn. My guest today is a very great artist, one of the best in the world, an inspiring man. His name is Sabin Howard, and helping me to interview him today is Julio Suarez, who's the chairman of our art department, himself a great artist and a tremendous teacher. We'll be back in a minute.
Do you believe in our founders' vision for America? That our republic will only survive if we are an educated and informed people who know our rights and duties. Since 1844, Hillsdale College has sought to educate all who wish to learn about these timeless principles of self-government. For more than 50 years, the college has worked to spread that mission by sending Imprimis to millions of Americans. Imprimis features some of the best speeches given at Hillsdale events, and now an audio version of the popular speech digest is available in a new podcast of the same name. And, like the print publication, Imprimis, the podcast, is always free. Listen to the best arguments from speakers such as Chris Rufo, Molly Hemingway, Mark Stein, and Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn, read by Hillsdale students. Subscribe today to listen to Imprimis at podcast.hillsdale.edu. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio.
We have two people today. Julio, I mentioned, and Sabin Howard. Sabin Howard is an inspiring man, and he makes beautiful and inspiring things. One of them is consequential to the national life because they have lately installed in Pershing Square near the National Mall a monument to World War I, which is one of the most breathtaking pieces of sculpture that I have ever seen. And there are others he's done that are the same. And so, welcome, Sabin.
I'm honored. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you. Great to have you. I want to start with people should know you and Julio. Julio is a painter, representational. These two men have something in common. They both think that art should be some depiction of nature. And it's a theme of Sabin's that it should contribute to freedom. And it's a subject dear to the hearts of every right-thinking human being. And they're both teachers. They've both done a lot of teaching. And Julio is a great teacher. His students come here and they make beautiful things. Most recently, 4 of them that I went to their art show last year, and they'd never done any art till they came here. And you'll see one of them, Claire Hensel's drawing of my house, on our Christmas card this year. And you'll know the story, where it comes from. And she'd never done any art, and she can do it now. Sabin, how did you get into all this?
Well, I didn't enter into art at a young age. I am from Italy, and I'm from New York. So I'd had a lot of experience as a young child in Europe, and then I went back to New York and was growing up in the 60s. So my hard drive was set by the thought of the world can be beautiful, and it can also be very much thinking outside the box. At age 19 one afternoon, 4 o'clock actually, October 22nd, 1982, I was working at a cabinet-making shop in South Philly, and 4 o'clock came around. I was like, I can't continue doing this. I am wasting my time. I got to do something. So I go over to my boss. I said to him, I quit. And he goes, well, you can't be a cabinet maker then. I said, I'm sorry, sir. It's just not working out. And he said, well, then I'm not going to pay you. And I was like, well, what is that, $42? And I gave him the finger and walked out the door. I had 1 quarter in my pocket. And I made the first call collect to my dad. And I asked my dad, I stated to my dad, I'm going to go to art school. And he goes, how long is this going to last? And the second call was to the Philadelphia College of Art. And I asked for admissions, and I spoke with the lady there. And she told me that I needed a portfolio if I wanted to get into art school. And I said, what is a portfolio? I made a beeline over to the admissions department, and I met with this lady, and she directed me towards this book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And I went and bought that book, and that night I started practicing how to draw. It's the hardest thing I ever did. And I ended up getting into that art school. I brought her back 90 drawings 90 days later. she pulled out 10 of them and said, "You're going to get in." And I said, "How do you know?" And she said, "I am the director of admissions. You will get in." And so that started my course towards making art that is of the nature of Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo.
Ooh, that's tall ambition.
Yes.
Very much.
Yes.
We're going to show you some of his sculptings. They are breathtaking, and they are, in my judgment, in that tradition. And you can judge for yourself. If you watch this, we're going to be looking at some paintings while we talk, or some sculptings while we talk. And if you watch this, you'll be able to see them. And if you don't, you can go watch this on our website and see them. And we'll put them up so that they're evident in their full strikingness. Julio, how'd you get into art?
Well, it's a little bit of a similar story that I started late. I always liked to draw and enjoyed drawing, but I didn't really take it very seriously, didn't do any art in high school. And after high school, I spent a couple years in trying to get my community college, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And one day, sitting on the beach, which we do a lot, and down in Miami, and me and my best friend and I, his little brother had gone to art school ahead of us, and he also liked to draw, but he was quite more serious about it than us, and he started to do very well. And we just had the idea that, hey, why don't we go to art school also? And I didn't have any work. I knew there was a portfolio involved. I immediately bought a sketchbook and started filling the sketchbook with drawings. And my portfolio to get into School of Visual Arts in New York was photocopies of my sketchbook, and they included a copy of the Livy and Sybil that we looked at yesterday, master copies, just drawing from my imagination. So it was just something, an idea, let's do something. And once I got there, I found that I was in the right place, and I fell in love with painting and drawing, observational, looking at nature just seemed like the funnest, most incredible thing that you can do. And somehow it led me here.
And you could do it. Is it a gift, or is it work, or is it both?
Honestly, I started at zero, and I think, all right, a lot of people say I'm very talented, but I would disagree with that. I would say my perseverance is off the charts. It's like I am unstoppable in terms of determination to achieve a goal. And when I came into this world as, okay, I'm going to be an artist today on that day, I honestly had no idea about modern art and the whole scam that has been perpetuated on us for the last 100 years. I really thought that Italian Renaissance was still in existence today. And the idea of being perseverant and also being a little bit naive and myopic about the goal is what my gift is. I mean, look at this last piece that I did. If I had known what I was tackling and what I get myself into on a regular basis, it's like, I don't know if I would have the courage to proceed.
Here, the last piece is this. It's the World War I memorial. And how big is it?
Well, it's 60 feet long, and it's around 10 feet high on the pedestal, and it has a 38-figure composition. It weighs 25 tons, and it is a visual narrative that is reminiscent of Western civilization and the giants and legends that come out of the Italian Renaissance. And honestly, Larry, this is a little bit of the vision that I had on that afternoon in the cabinet making shop. I really wanted to make something that competed with Sistine Chapel and the David in Florence. And it's like, if I had thought, oh, well, nobody's doing that these days, I would never have gotten on that ship.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to mention your book now because it gives me a chance to mention your wife, who's important. Her name is Tracy Slayton, and she wrote much of the book. And I will tell you, I can't think of a better book about art and its meaning that I've ever read than that book. And it's partly because of you and partly because of the artfulness of the lady you married. How'd you meet her?
You're going to get personal?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Oh, well, I went over to pick up my young daughter. This is 25 years ago almost. My daughter was 10, and she'd made a play date with Tracy's daughter, who was 10. And I hung out for a second, waiting for Tracy to come home. And then Tracy walks in the door, and I was shocked at how stunningly beautiful she was. And she still is to me. And we sat down, and we talked for 5 hours. And one of the topics that she mentioned was Bernini's The Ecstasy of Santa Teresa, which for me was like, how does this woman know about this? On many levels. And that was the beginning of a great friendship and relationship.
If you read the book, you will read that story, and you will read that, how shall I put it? Marital relations come to mind.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
For both of you. And it's a little image of the way that art depicts nature. And she says of you that you don't think in words, you think in forms and images. And she tells it in the book. Get the book and you can read it, find out what it is. What form and image was in your mind?
Well, that's this is a PG show, so we're not going to go there. but I was very smitten, not only by how beautiful she is, but also by her understanding about how energy and humanity are so interwoven. The conversation just continued, and it wasn't like we were just talking about the weather and stuff. We were talking about very, very deep spiritual ideas about the human condition. And that is what my household has been like since that first day that I met her.
Lovely. Lovely. Do we do modern art here at Hillsdale College, Julio?
Well, first, before we answer that very difficult question, back to the talent, or is it a gift thing? Yeah. So one of the things that the first lessons that I try to give in a beginning drawing class, for example, is to get past this idea of talent being something that you either have or you don't. Yes, some of us have, things come easier to us than others, but in my experience, we have to forget about that and focus on the fact that you get good. You get good at whatever you work hard at, whatever you have the desire to get good at, and it's always effort, grit that Sabin has. That's what then after many years of hard work and teachers helping you and frustration and you're so talented, but the talent is just the desire to get good and having the discipline to do the amount of work that it takes to get good, and it applies to everything. So that idea that you get good at something is central to our teaching. And our students show me that. They all start at different levels, and some of them have some training, most of them have no training. And in the end, it's always the ones who learn the most and are the most successful. They just know how to work. And we're lucky that most of our students know how to work. So we, that's why it works. So, modern art. Well, my philosophy is that we need to teach our students or give them the opportunity to have the same skills or being taught in similar ways that they were in the past, 19th century, 18th century. I don't necessarily want them to make work that is of the 19th century. I want them to make work that is of our times, but with having the same skills, having the same language available to express themselves that we had in the past. But we can say things of our time. I don't think that all modern art was bad. I think another thing that I focus with our students is teaching them how to find the quality in things, separate it from style. And we can't say, well, all abstract art is bad. We have to judge it. There could be quality there. The same way that not all representational art is good. Not all figurative sculpture is good. Just because it's figurative sculpture, there's qualities that it needs to have, and usually that quality has to do with truth and nature.
What's the scam? You mentioned the scam.
The scam. Well, if It is really ironic because I make a memorial now, and the memorial is reminiscent of the way the world was back 100 years ago. And World War I is a line in the sand that demarcates the changeover from divine order, the sense that God is at the helm, and we are all united in one universe. Modern art comes first and foremost because 22 million people are decimated in World War I. And in that decimation of humanity, there's a decimation of the human condition, and there's a loss of hope, and you move towards nihilism. Sartre, Camus come out of France, and chaos ensues in terms of modern man all of a sudden now being alienated. The beginning of modern art had great foundations on these principles. It had substance and meaning and value. Classical art had fallen apart because it had become like a Chanel No. 5 commercial that is just beautiful. It had no story, had no concept of what the story was about. The spiritual truth and light of human nature. What is the meaning of our life? What is our purpose? It had disappeared. It's like entertaining. It looks pretty. And so the modernist steps in, and then now all of a sudden you have the anti-aesthetic. What this anti-aesthetic, though, got hijacked and became something that is redundant and has been played forward for years and years and years. And I call it the emperor's new clothes because, honestly, if you look at it, there's nothing there sometimes. Some of it obviously has qualities of excellence, like Julio's saying, yes. But a lot of it is purely about conceptual knowledge and the book that was written about that piece of art. And that's where it crumbles and falls apart. And you move into this value of art on a monetary basis. And that's then the value of that piece of art based upon how much it's worth in an auction house at Sotheby's. That's wrong. It needs to be returned to its rightful owner. Truth, light, and beauty. And honestly, that's about God. And we are created in God's image. And so I'm very passionate about this because I want art to be about the sacred.
And I want to follow up on something that I agree. And when I talk about some modern art having some value, I'm thinking of modern artists who were trained, they were trained in this system. They had skills. And at the very beginning, there was something there. Eventually, it just became, just like you said, just formulaic and just repeating.
Yeah.
And we decided that if I want to continue down the path that Picasso or Matisse did, but I don't need the training and the knowledge that they had, because they did have training and knowledge.
So I have a general point about education. I'm in the college president game. I can make it. What young people have to understand is that knowledge is not about them. I mean, knowledge of them is, but they have to learn to look outside themselves. We love the word create today, and we do. We human beings are the only creatures who create. That's true. And that's distinctive about us. On the other hand, we like to know, and to know is to know something outside you. And there's a wonderful account of the soul in Aristotle, where he describes how you're able to understand what that cup is. It's ceramic, informed, and the form is an activity. And the active intellect, he calls it, can reach out and participate in that activity. But for it to do that, it mustn't be anything except that activity. It's nothing until it thinks. And you see, in other words, and like Julio and you've been a teacher. You have this experience with them, right? When they stop thinking about themselves, they can start thinking about things. And like you gave yourself to this, that was a terrible war. It was as bad as any war has ever been, specifically for the troops who fought it. In the trenches, Churchill writes, the dead moldered in the soil. At the Battle of Cold Harbor in the Civil War in 1864, which was the precursor the last year of the Civil War was like the trench warfare. And people were buried in the trenches by being walked over for days because they didn't have strength and people to get them out. And so that's as bad as it can be. And yet, this is also heroic. And these people, they are suffering, but they're not despairing. That's describe that a little bit.
The whole concept, okay, you will never meet another person that hates war as much as I do, because I have experienced it not as a soldier, but as something that as a young child, I was shocked by the day that I saw that image on the front page of the New York Times of the young Vietnamese girl who had just been napalmed, and she is coming directly out at you, and it is a contorted face with their 2 children on her left, a young brother and a little girl holding hands, and they look like they're in spasm because they are being tortured, but what they have escaped. In the back, there are these American soldiers walking up the rear, and then there are these clouds of war behind that. And that image, I can speak about it at this moment, but when I was doing that sculpture, I got into the subject of death and destruction and nihilism on a level that is not healthy for human beings. It is a war memorial, but first and foremost, it is a memorial, to humanity. And that is what is necessary today, to value the sacredness of human life. And when you look at a great piece of art, it should elevate your consciousness and move you towards the sacred. And so I told a story that any 8th grader will understand. It is a story of a father, a soldier, and an allegory for the United States that left home, entered into battle, was transformed as the world was transformed, just as he was transformed as an individual. And then he returns home to hand his daughter his helmet, and she is the next generation. She is handed the next war, World War II. And these wars, the war to end all wars, that's what it was named. It's the kickoff for wars that never end. And these never-ending wars, I am in opposition to those, and that's why I made this sculpture, because I do not believe that this is the way governments should spend their money. They should be spent on things that are actively promoting a country and not going out and spending arms to destroy other places on the planet. It is a fracturing of our world, and this piece is about unifying our world and our planet.
Powerful. Yeah, wars. Winston Churchill wrote an essay called, he was anti-war.
Yes.
He was just very good at fighting them. and he didn't want to fight any that were not forced on him. He wrote an essay in 1926 called, Shall We All Commit Suicide? And he talks about what you just said, the power of the weapons, the wealth of the nations to fund these wars. And the first sentence is, the story of the human race is war. That's the first sentence. And I fear it will continue to be. But to avoid it, and if you get into it, to try to find a way to win it, because the worst thing is to lose a war to evil people. And the people who wage aggressive war are evil people. And the most evil people recorded in history are at the fountain of these 2 world wars. And so when you're confronted with them, you got to figure out what to do. And the choices are limited. But that's the cost right there on display. And it's the Greeks tore themselves to pieces. The Persians couldn't tear them to pieces. They tore themselves to pieces. And they had felt the brotherhood when they were fighting the Persians. And then they turned on each other. So avoiding that would be good. I want you to teach us a little art. And I've spent some time looking at your sculptings, which are magnificent. And I've decided that for now, at least, my favorite is this sculpting of Hermes. And the particular thing I like about it is the set of his mouth. it's a god, a pagan god, a messenger god, and he looks like us, except better. And if you look at the set of his mouth, what it speaks to me is he is entirely unconcerned. So explain this. Also, the snake. Snake is in 2 of your sculptures.
Yeah.
So talk about this. How did you do this and why?
Okay, that piece is Hermes, and that was actually the first life-size piece I ever did. And I was like, this was like 2005. And I had a show in San Francisco, and I got this commission. I was like, oh, yes, scores. You know, an artist who's struggling. And I get this show, and I'm selling, and I'd been teaching, and I really wanted to get out of teaching and proceed to make art full-time. I made this pose, and it's very Michelangelo-esque. Mercury is the messenger of all gods, but it's different. It's a Hermemagistics, where Hermes, you see like Mercury, the John Bologna piece, he holds a caduceus, which is the symbol for pharmacies. I took the snake and I had it have a completely different meaning. The pose is a spiral pose, and it's a past where he's leaving, he's pushing off with his toe on the block. He's present with the other stand leg that's locked into the ground, and the future is his gaze and his hand, and he's completely unfazed by the snake that he holds in his other arm, outstretched arm, that's looking directly at his head. He holds his fears in his hands, and he proceeds because he manifests his destiny. And that was what the sculpture taught me. To proceed with your fears, hold them in your hand, and go towards your destiny. And that's what all my work has always been about. It's about what can be, about uplifting us, not about what we are not and what we lack, but it's a heroic way of looking at the God-given gift of life.
Hermes is often displayed in classical sculptures with wings on his feet, and you don't have those. What you have is a foot ready to push off.
Exactly. And the ground is also alive. It's amorphous. It's moving. So the movement is around him. The wings have been put in the ground and in the hair. And the hair is in movement and active because it's his imagination.
Hey, it's Scott Bertram, and I've got a challenge for you today. Become a better educated American citizen. And to help you do just that, we at Hillsdale College have our free online courses available for all who wish to learn. Our challenge? Take just one of our courses. There are so many to choose from. You can discover the beauty of the Bible and the Genesis story, study the writings of C.S. Lewis, or explore the true meaning of America in Constitution 101. We have dozens more to choose from, and all these self-paced free courses feature Hillsdale faculty and scholars, many you've heard on this podcast. So visit hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE, and pick one of the more than 30 free Hillsdale courses. I hope you'll accept my challenge. Pick whichever course you like and become a more educated citizen today. Go to hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE. That's hillsdale.edu/course.
In the process of making this, how much of that did you know when you began?
It's always been the same. It's like I said last night, there's no book on making monuments for dummies. There was no book for making this piece when I came to it. And so I made a 36-inch model, and then I built myself an enlarging machine so I could find points in space, finding XYZ axis within a frame. And I put the little piece, the 36-incher, in one box, and then I built another box, and I would locate my point and multiply it by 2.5 and find the same point in space for the enlargement. And I recreated it that way, and then when I had recreated the larger piece, it was too skinny, and basically then I had to go to work. So it's constant problem solving all the time.
And Sabin, since these days all I do is talk to students.
Yeah.
I'm talking to students. So you're saying that you don't need to know how to do it. You need to know what you want to do.
Yeah.
And then you find the way.
We don't need to know. That's right. You need
have
your
a path laid out.
Yeah, it's never there.
It's never there.
It's never there. It's like you're driving to California in the dark with your headlights, but you have a map and a GPS to get to Los Angeles.
Sculpting is physical labor.
Very.
Painting is...
it could be physical.
It's it's work. You got to stand up. You got to... I have lots to do with architects. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And architecture in the minds of the classical architects, and I know we're working right now with 3 of the great ones, it's sculpting at a bigger scale. And sculpting is painting in 3 dimensions.
Right. They share something, which is drawing.
Yes.
And I always come back to drawing, and I always find any excuse to talk about drawing, especially with someone like Sabin, who is such a gifted draftsman. So just a technical question about that sculpture. When I look at the sculpture, the first thing that jumps out at me, since I'm always thinking of how it's made, it's the gesture. Can you talk a little bit to our students or anyone interested in what is gesture and why is it important in whether it's a figure drawing or a sculpture, and how do you attain that? How does a student or an artist make sure that the gesture of the figure is true and real?
That's a really good question, and it goes in line with what you just talked about architecture. My figures are working in architecture in an organic form, and I conceived or was trained with the ideology that there are masses in the body, and those masses are made of cubes, they're rectilinear solids, and they move in space from each joint, and each joint has a specific movement. It could be abduction, adduction, rotation, flexion, extension. So knowing how many degrees or angles those solids are moving from those points in space, which are the joints, then you actually construct and deduct from life a pose. And so this is a complete abstraction of a live human being, and it is the framework that then you can build upon and go from general to specific. And it's exactly the same way that you build a house, except this is an organic construction. And the added thing from abstract art, it shows the psychology of a human being or the soul of a human being. And that gesture tells the story that depicts that soul. And that's what Leonardo did in the Last Supper.
Michelangelo studied anatomy and did dissections. And it just occurred to me, looking at this wonderful thing, that you couldn't have a model, you couldn't take enough photographs of a model to get every possible permutation of how the statue might end up. So you actually have to know how a human being moves. Because if you make an adjustment, it has to be accurate. And that means the underneath of the human being. I just saw that for the first time. I'm learning a little art here.
You have to have a vision of what the pose is that you always return to, because a model is shifting 1,000 points a day. It's like not still. A human being's not still. So you better have an idea of what your story is and what's the best way to tell that story in that gesture.
I want to talk about the snake because in mindfulness, there's a snake and the character is staring at the snake. And here, the character, Hermes, is looking away from the snake. He seems to be emphatically not interested in the snake. What's going on there?
The other piece I did, mindfulness, was done. It was the first piece that I had done with that concept of snake and nude male. And it preceded this by about 5 years. And I was still in art school and graduate school, New York Academy of Art. And I was really intrigued by like Donatello's work, which is more static. It's more niche oriented. And this is kind of like proceeding to the next level where I'm rejecting the idea that the figure is contained within a niche or an architectural unit. And it's very much like what happened with art in general. You moved away from the containment. And so he's looking like David's Bernini, the Bernini that he made with the slingshot. He's looking at where the slingshot is going to go. So it extends beyond the niche. And so now all of a sudden you've created much larger space. And it has to do with like life and art. Life is always imitated by art. And so my life and the vision and potentiality had grown so much because I had met Tracy, actually. Actually, that's exactly why. She said, why not? It's limitless. Look how much talent you have. And I got out of the vision of this. My life has to be this. I broke the bounds of the box. And so the snake that I was staring at, that was the fear that held me back, now is like, okay, I'm holding in my hand. Let's just go. Let's roll. And a lot of it had to do with me having all of a sudden someone by my side that gave me the courage to proceed. Mm-hmm. So that's the personal story.
Anybody interested in marriage should study this marriage. It's a good one. Amazing. I want to talk about Aphrodite.
The opposite of war.
The opposite of war. This is Aphrodite. Now, your wife writes of her. She is very beautiful. And Hermes is, I like to say, the classical statues of the Greek gods. They look like us, except better. And she does. But your wife writes of her, she's not makeup model pretty. She's pretty in some other way. So what about that? Explain this statue.
That piece was done, my studio was in the South Bronx, and I went on Craigslist, and I think I worked with 7 different models for each of the parts and made a single figure that told the story about what is the opposite of war, which is Mars. It is Venus, and Venus is the goddess of love. And it is about equilibrium and when things are in stasis. And so her hands, her arms are in the symbol of the scales. And I believe she is represented in astrology as Libra, the symbol for the scales, when things are in balance. And so the one hand is accepting the palm raised up towards the heaven, the idea, the metaphysical idea. And the other hand is gesturing down, and that hand is placing that metaphysical idea in the physical realm, which is created through love. And this is very esoteric and was one of the reasons that I stopped making this type of work, because I wanted the work that I made to be understood by general populace. So these ideas are very philosophical and very ingrained in Greco-Roman culture. And I think they were the basis for my learning and understanding on how to make this war memorial.
At one point in the making of the sculptor, you got a power saw and whacked off her arm.
I did.
What was that about?
I am a perfectionist, and I don't really look at how the meter is running, and I just want to make something which is the best that I am capably possible of as an artist. And I chopped off her arm because the proportions were wrong and lost several weeks of work and just started it over. I cut it off and put a new armature in and made it correctly. But that's the thing. It's like there are values, and this is a really great question you're asking me. There are values. This is not like, how do you feel? How do I feel? No, there are really proportional values because they're based upon how God put the world and nature together. So if you don't get them right, you're not doing something correctly. And I don't think that's something that modern art says.
So that's a wonderful, if it's wrong.
Yes.
So I've learned a lot working in a college and being a teacher. And one of the things I'm fond of saying to students these days, many of us say it, is after you write the first sentence in a paper, you don't own it anymore. You can start over if you want to, but whatever comes next, the whole rest of it, it's got to fit now. And it doesn't have to fit your will. Your will has to conform to what makes sense, to reason and nature.
Yes.
And so
same thing.
Yeah, there you go. And this one, it was, you said armature. And what that means, I think, is when you make this is made out of clay first.
That's an internal armature. It's the steel that holds it together.
That's right. So you build a structure.
Yeah.
And then you pat the clay all around it.
That's right.
And then through the lost wax process, which people should look up because it's fascinating, it turns into a bronze sculpture. And so it was difficult to start over, but you couldn't fix it.
Yeah.
It wasn't right.
Yeah, you got to fix things. And it's like the big memorial with the 38 figures. That's now we're looking down the road. We're looking down the road another 20, 22 years, and that's like I'm chopping and hacking figures. Every single figure I moved at full scale and redesigned it. This was like my beginning of it. I got to the big memorial. I didn't have time. I'd already been in this fight for 42 years. It's like we're going national here. I better make something of excellence. If I don't make it excellent, I've failed. Mediocre's not going to cut the deal here.
And that means you couldn't have done this at the outset.
No, I could not have.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell I could have done that.
And Sabin, would you agree that a big part of making this kind of work, you have to be okay with being wrong?
Yeah,
a lot.
Absolutely. I failed daily. Daily, I screw it up. And then I come back the next day and fix it as best as I can. I never hit like perfection. That's impossible, but the vision can be of that.
So there's a chapter in your book about in the art of life, which people should read, about work, about persistence. And this is work. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's work. And that didn't just, there's a tree in the background of this photograph. That sculpting didn't grow up like that tree. It had to be made. There's a chapter about freedom. Let's talk about freedom. What has the art to do with freedom?
Well, this is a very deep question you're asking me. I don't understand it personally as an artist, where I chose to be not of the herd. I chose to have my own vision. I chose to proceed basically alone, not within the group. And freedom is the choice to do what you wish with your life, that you don't have to be what your parents were. And that's what this country is about. Manifesting one's destiny, the ability to choose how you will use that terminal energy that you have been given by God. I have often done things where people go, how could you put all your eggs in one basket? And I'm like, because there is no other option. Success is the only option. And so with the determination, and that's like what you were talking about before, Julio, it's like, you don't know how you're going to get to point B. You just did a rocket launch. Now we're going. Let's go. There's no turning back. And it's the courage to accept what you will face on that road towards your objective.
Do you think we can teach that?
I think that at a certain point it is part of the personality, because it's how much you can deal with that sense of being uncomfortable in having your freedom. And a lot of people in this day and age have asked, I don't really want to be free. Let someone else decide for me. And I'm unwilling to take that. Fine, you want to do that. I am not. And we can go down a real long rabbit hole on government, how much government has gotten involved in our lives. But I am one to believe that free will is something that this country is its strength. And look at what just happened. Where'd that monument end up? What country was that monument made in? It's a Renaissance monument, 60 feet long with 38 figures. Where did it end up? In the United States? Not in Europe, not in Russia, not in Ukraine. Here, United States. That says a lot.
And nobody invited you to do this.
It was a choice.
See, I will say that I happen to love America very much and love its idea. I regard myself as a beneficiary of the idea just as you are, but your story is a microcosm of the story. You had a job. Cabinet making's cool. It's a noble job. But it wasn't satisfying you, and you went and fought your way into art school. And your dad was a history professor, right? And he condoned that, except with a quiet warning, better pick something and stick to it. And here you've now done all these sculptures and this great mass one, and you've published this book. And one of the chapters is the lesson from your dad, persistence.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
But that, I'd love to say, well, it's Aristotle, but it's also evident everywhere you look. In any good, well, ours is the best college, but in a good college, the work of the student comes from the student, and they want to give it very much. Those 4 students that I went to their art show in the spring, and I was very taken with it. And I went because they run up to me and say, "You got to come to our art show." And when they do that, if I can find the time, I go. The point was, they made all of that. And they were grateful to Julio. And then I got the idea of asking Julio on this because at the art show, I said to him, "How'd you do this?" And he effectively said, "I didn't. We just taught them the basics." You see, it was in them. And that's where the freedom is. This is a fight for freedom, and the sacrifice is in them. And the making of this, the sacrifice was in you.
Art imitates life.
Right. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking a little bit about, and our students saying that we're tough teachers, and he's a very tough teacher, and I'm kind of a tough teacher, and how much students react positively to that challenge, how much they hear, how well they accept that challenge, and the fact that they know that you need to be tough, you need to challenge them to make things that are important and good, and they just love it. They just love it. And then it turns out, like those students that Larry went to the show, they just work so hard. This stuff doesn't just happen. It's work. And we need to continue to challenge our young people that...
I was here now for 24 hours, and I have never been so encouraged by a university or a school's academic system. You can ask my wife. I'm so disillusioned with most schools and art institutions around our country. And here's why I'm so enthused by what you guys are doing, because you have a reverence for Western civilization and history. And unless you learn those, the things of the past that make us who we are today and are that umbrella that unifies us as a country and a culture, unless you do that, you will create a void. If you destroy history, you will create a void, and you will repeat the exact same mistakes. And we were talking about this at lunch, Larry, where if the young people of today do not understand how brutal and horrible the destruction of humanity is in war, especially if we were to enter into World War III, then if they do not understand that, they will not be like front and center and protest what is happening and the sleepwalking of our world into the next mass destruction on the planet. And so I'm incredibly grateful for the way you have set up your system to teach your students. It's kudos, really.
Well, we've learned a lot together here. And when I came to work in the college almost 25 years ago, I thought if we're any good, we should be able to help them all. And so I set about trying. And I teach every term here, but my favorite sport is eating at lunch with the students in the dining hall. And I would have these difficult conversations with them. And they had complaints. 25% of them left after the freshman year, which is a better number than most places have. Our number now is 3 or 4%. And I began to see that I couldn't help them unless they wanted me to. And I should have known it. I read Aristotle, Winston Churchill. I know that the motion of the living thing is in the thing, even plants, right? And certainly in people. I should have known that. I didn't know it. I gave up on the idea that we were going to do things to them. I don't think you do. I think you help them do things that they want to do. And so there are 2 criteria to get into Hillsdale College. It's hard to get in, very hard now. You have to be able, and that's usually not very hard to tell. and you have to be willing. You have to want to do it. Like, if you didn't urgently want to be, I read in your book that you have spent 45,000 hours. That's
We're up to 75,000 now.
75,000. And divide by 2,000, and that will give you roughly a normal working year, but you don't work normal years, right? And that came from you. Yeah. You wanted to do it. And it would be easy. Neither of you, both of you, I'm watching, but both of you are excellent artists, right? But it'd be easy for you to say, well, I was born with a gift. And in that case, you'd be saying it's something you possess, but it isn't. It's something you earn, and you got to work for it. So the big change we made was we introduced an honor code, and I had already begun, but I intensified now. Last night I was in Columbus, Ohio, and I talked to a school, one of our 100 schools we've helped to form. And there's a bunch of bright young kids there, and they want to come to Hillsdale College, a lot of them. And I told them, you don't want to come to Hillsdale College. It's going to be too hard. Shouldn't do it. And the more you say that, the more they want to come.
I love it.
And one boy was particularly forward, and I said, well, why do you want to come? And, in front of 400 people, grown-ups, he didn't know, right? And of course, he said some things that he couldn't explain. He's 18 years old. And so I asked him to explain them. And the next thing you know, he's tied up in knots, And then that's kind of embarrassing. And I said, still want to come? And he said, yes. And I said, maybe you'll do then, huh? But I was giving him a chance to grow, which is what every living thing exists to do. And if you try to grow for them because you think it's an assertion of your power that you make them grow, then all you can do is stunt them. That's what we're doing. And I'll tell a Churchill story because I love to. Hitler, Dwight Eisenhower, George W. Bush, and Winston Churchill were painters. Churchill was a good painter. I don't think the others were. Churchill writes a masterpiece about painting. He was a great writer, really great. I mean, truly, up there with the best. I don't think his painting was that, but what do I know? He uses the word obedience when he writes about painting. He said he speaks of the current French school, and they persist in painting their oceans with up and down strokes and their tree trunks side to side. But he said, if you will instead attend to the nature around you, it will appear on the canvas with remarkable obedience. And it's not him that it's obeying. It's nature. Isn't that the distinction we're after?
Absolutely. That's the first thing we need to do, and we do is teach our students how to see, open their eyes so they can take in nature, and that's the source. And it all begins there, and that's the difference. We need to keep going back to that source.
My teacher, Walter Erlbacher, who I had when I just began, who was the sculptor who taught me the real structure of the figure. He gave me the information, and it was the hardest class. He would smoke cigarettes and blow the smoke into my face, and he would say, "What the F are you? You're not a sculptor," and just blow the smoke in my face and continue. And the more he would knock me down, the more I would fight back. And what he did is, I was a seed in the ground, and all he did is water me, but the watering was not kind. It was watering to make me grow, because he knew if he punched me down, I would continue to grow. And so I really like what you guys are doing here, because you're creating the soil and all the conditions for then to water them, and it's up to them to grow. It's not, you're setting up the situation, and that's what's necessary.
And one of the things that I noticed the first time I came to Hillsdale 8 years ago was this idea that there was trust.
Yeah.
That for this to work, for us to be able to be tough with the students, there needs to be trust. And I sense from the first time I came to visit, they trust that the school has their best interest, and then that means they trust the professors. There's just a relationship there built upon trust that allows for this to happen, and that growth and that learning. So
I'm fond of saying two things. One is, no 18-year-old worth his salt will do anything because you said so. The second thing is, you can do anything with them if they think you love them. And, because they want to grow. Like, I wanted you to talk to the students today because you're a great artist and because they love to see the thing that they might become in its full maturity. And they copy it and they see it. An example. Yeah. Oh, this is what that would be like, you see. And they just drink that in. So I've made a resolution today. It was forming in my mind before you came, but then you came and it's obvious. I'm going to endeavor to get you involved with Hillsdale College. And you'll be good for us, and we will work hard to be good for you. And anything you want to say finally, Julio, and then Sabin?
Well, I just want to thank Sabin for making the trip. The students have just loved hearing your talk. I'm getting emails right now about can we go say hello and meet with him. And it's what you said. They just want to see someone doing it at the highest level, what they aspire to, and him just telling them how it is. It's work. It's determination. It's just having this focus on being the best you can be. So thanks. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You are a great man.
Thank you for saying that.
We're all privileged to know you.
I appreciate that very much. It's more that I work for others. And I am in service of something way larger than myself. And that's the message that I wish to play forward with my work.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching.